Alrighty, folks. So I am delighted to be joined here by Mati Staniszewski, who is the co-founder of ElevenLabs. I think it's fair to say that Eleven is just the most successful breakout company out of the UK in the past 5 years. You guys just passed $100 million in ARR. Eleven raised money at most recently a $3 billion valuation from investors like Sequoia and Andreessen Horowitz and Nat Friedman we were just discussing. And as you saw, Eleven is doing voice AI. And so just to give you a sense of how good the products have actually gotten, you know what my voice sounds like. You've had to hear a lot from me. Maybe we can do a demo. You guys cloned my voice, so maybe we can just do a demo of the AI John voice for comparison.
I know they say AI is a productivity booster, but human John is so lazy these days.
OK, and part of what we'll get to that is very relevant is AI in other languages. And so I don't speak Hindi, but we can maybe give the other demo.
मैं जानता हूँ कि AI से productivity boost होती है, लेकिन जॉन तो आजकल बहुत ही सुस्त हो गया है.
So they've gotten really good. There's so much to talk. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
There's so much to talk about, but maybe to start, you founded ElevenLabs in 2022, so before ChatGPT launch and before I think the latest AI craze. Why voice? Why ElevenLabs?
Well, thanks for having me here. I'm in such a lucky position that we've actually shown you some of the work that we do, so you can actually hear it for yourself. But one of the things that we believed for a very long time is that voice is the best interface to interact with the technology, to interact with the devices around us. But truly, the inspiration came. So I'm in a very lucky position where I've known my co-founder for 15 years now. Through the years, we studied, we worked, we lived together. Now we co-founded ElevenLabs together, and despite lows and ups, we are still best friends. So the time is on our side. But one of the inspirations came from where we are both from when we started the company in 2022. And the very peculiar thing for both of us, we are both from Poland, is that if you watch a movie, a foreign movie in Polish language, all the voices, whether it's a male or female voice, are narrated with one single narrator. So you have this very, as you can imagine, terrible experience where literally there's like an audiobook narration across the movie. So that was our trigger point.
You're watching a movie and like the guy, the gal, the villain, all are the same voice actor. Yeah.
And it like kind of is flat on purpose, so you are meant to imagine the emotions the characters are speaking with. And it's still happening today, and that was effectively the trigger point in 2022 that now as we think the technology is developing, with Transformer, the diffusion models, we believe the same will apply in audio and started ElevenLabs. Of course, that original vision expanded from the dubbing beginning into how the voice can amplify everything from narration through to dynamic interaction.
And how long till you guys had a demo where you said, OK, this is really good? Because I presume that then there was a lot of steps to get to $100 million in ARR. But yeah, how long till you had a demo where you're like, oh, wow, it's finally really good?
Finally really good. So we had a number of demos in the first 6 months where it wasn't very good. I think the moment where it hit was when we released this set of samples where for the first time the AI could somewhat laugh. It produced laughter, and people picked it up and started telling us that, wow, this is the first time we heard AI actually laugh. So that was the first moment where I was like, OK, this might be on a good direction. And then there was a second moment in our beta when we decided to release it. So we launched the first prototype. It was this tiny box, like Twitter-type box where you could input a sentence or two at a time. And in the beta, we had a number of book authors come in and copy-paste the entire book thousands of times, download it, take the book, upload it to the services. At the time, you couldn't upload AI content out there, upload it, get reviews back that it's actually very good, and bring back with them a lot of other people in the space to work on that too. So that was like moment, OK, this is really hitting off, and then a number of others.
I want to pause on this for a second, because the way sometimes people describe the phenomenon of product market fit as you know it when you see it, the product is flying off the shelves, people are trying to use it for things that you couldn't possibly have imagined. It sounds like you had this moment here where this is not ready to be an audiobook narration tool, but you had people chunking up their books into tiny segments to actually be able to use it. That's when you knew that you maybe had something.
Exactly. I was like, this is the and credit to my co-founder, Piotr, who has been the original brain behind a lot of the innovations to make the model actually sound human, sound narrative. But it was the first moment where we were seeing in the wild people interacting with the book and like, OK, the model is actually good, performing at the level where you can actually.
And so when was this moment in the company's history? When you
it was November 2022.
But that's really fast to have a shock and awe demo like that. So within a year, you had people.
Within a year, and of course, everything else followed after with that you need the product to actually interact with it. Things were breaking, the infrastructure wasn't ready, and then we had a few other moments throughout the first year or two where you could feel the second moment that you mentioned of like things falling through, not enough GPUs to actually serve the clients, and things breaking at all times. But now it's stable.
Yeah,
that's good.
It's kind of interesting also in AI, because it can be so compute intensive, you do have these servers melting down moments. Like I was trying to use Claude 4 earlier this week, and it's too popular. There's a servers melting down moment, and so that's an interesting phenomenon with AI in particular. So you referenced voice as the interaction modality for computers. And one thing I'm interested in is we have had a vision for a very long time of voice being the main way we interact with computers and not UIs. So hands up here, who's seen 2001: A Space Odyssey? OK, pretty good taste, at least some of you. So classic movie. And open the pod bay doors, Hal. There is an AI there, a computer, and the primary way that they interact with the computer is via voice. That movie was released in 1968, so 57 years ago. We're still scrolling our phones like primitive creatures here. When does voice become the primary way that we're interacting with at least some devices? Alexa, turn on the lights does not count. I'm talking about slightly more sophisticated computer use than that. When does that happen and what's required?
So I think there are two breakthroughs that need to happen. The first one is the model breakthrough. We already are seeing in production use cases where you can interact with the technology and it feels human, feels better than what existed in the past. But I think that Turing test for voice interaction of like where you cannot really tell that it's AI and it's as good as the human, I think this hopefully will make it happen this year.
Yeah, the voice actually feels good enough. It's the rest of the package that feels to me.
And exactly, and then you need to bring it to the distribution side, which I think we're already seeing in a set of companies. But I think as we think about this and next year, sometime in the next 2 years, we'll see that shift from being the early adopters phenomena to actually a set of early majority, actually people adopting that technology. And we've seen examples from we work with Perplexity as one of those, where if they've built an assistant where you can both ask it a question through typing or speak to it and actually get a response. And it's such a pleasurable and amazing experience. So we already are seeing the pattern of that forming. But like you said, it's a dream across the movies for a long time. I'm sure many people also have seen the Iron Man and the Jarvis example and the assistant in that piece. But it always was where you like interact with the technology through voice, not through typing. And hopefully that will happen this year.
Are there interesting aspects of the non-word parts of verbal communication to get right? Like when I think OpenAI was the first that I saw, at least, in ChatGPT in the voice mode. Maybe you guys had it before that, where you could interrupt, and that was part of the features. And the interrupting is super janky, but it's way better than nothing. And you realize just how the ability to actually cut across and know when a sentence is over is actually an important part of voice conversations. What are the other things that we might, people might think converting this string of text to voice as the important part of it, but actually maybe there's some really surprising aspects of this work that we as non-voice scientists wouldn't realize?
The interesting thing is that for a long time, you are trying to make the technology as perfect as possible. And initially, when we started as well, we were trying to make voices speak as fluent, no mistakes as possible for the companies we work with, which made a lot of sense as we thought about the customer service use cases, healthcare use cases, financial service use cases. But then it turned out at some point that you actually want to make it more human for people to engage better. So what this means in practice, we worked with this company in logistics space where they were effectively allowing people to book appointments through calling the agent, and they were calling back, confirming the appointment. And they created a voice which, instead of being perfect, started doing the ums, the starting doing the weird breathing. And that suddenly improved the experience by double-digit % of people actually going through the end of the call and enjoying that a lot better. And now, as you think about a lot of our work, this is what makes the voices so unique and so different. Of course, this won't work for all use cases, but that humanness, the imperfections, are actually the important piece for people to engage and interact. And then, of course, there are experiences where the voice having some peculiarity is what makes the experience. So recently, we worked with Epic Games, where we recreated, along with the estate, the voice of Darth Vader. Darth Vader voice is so unique in how it works across. And you really want to keep that across as the players interact. But you also want to keep the tone of the dark force across the interaction, where the
He's a serious guy.
He's a serious guy. You don't want to joke with him. And you want to keep that across. And you want to do that across millions of players with low latency at all times. So how do you make sure that happens? And that was similarly like a good combination of you need to make sure that the voice is there, that the character that you've built represents that in the right way. The responses are short and snappy. So very much the voice uniqueness will matter in trying to bring it closer to the human one.
It seems like the three places I think that people are most using voice today are smart home device and activations, just text input into their phone, but like filling out a text field as opposed to anything more advanced or broader than that, and then phone trees. What will the next modality that we don't have today, at least widely deployed, that we'll start using be?
I think the interactive media is definitely one that we are seeing across. So
the video game stuff you were describing.
The gaming example, exactly. That's one. How like the static universe will start morphing into interactive, but also like even traditional media. We've seen this use case with the Time, where you could during the President of the Year, you could read the article, you could listen to the article, but you could also ask the article questions. So you could actually interact with it, learn more about the Person of the Year, ask for who the other people of the year are. So the interactive media is one big category. The second one, the currently customer support is definitely something that you kind of need to go through if the product doesn't work. I think this will shift into the entire brand experience and onboarding into product experience, where it's going to be front and center, where if you are interacting with the product, you will have the agent that helps you navigate through the product, learn where the pieces are, how to actually work with the pieces, and that will be an interesting shift of interacting with the software as a whole.
So are you saying that right now customer service is something you call in a frustrated way if something goes wrong, but maybe voice onboarding is something that would help a lot of people use products?
100%. I think it's like the current experience where you like call the phone tree, the IVR treatment, isn't very good, isn't very crisp. And now this will shift into an experience that's actually enjoyable. There is a context and knowledge about what you are calling with, and it can actually help you go through the next stage of what you're actually trying to achieve, whether it's a booking appointment, whether it's a billing question, a refund. All of that will actually be a pretty quick and easy experience, which you might want to do to just get through that, but then it will extend also for you to be able to understand what a product is about, how do I use it, and how to make most of it.
Yes. All the businesses in the audience are thinking about, we're certainly thinking about, just the right ways to incorporate AI. What do you think businesses should be doing to actually use the productivity gains from AI on a day-to-day basis? It could be voice, but it could be broader as well.
Yeah, of course, there's like from what we see as a pattern, there's those two wide categories of efficiency, margins. How do we optimize on that side? Second, growth. How you get more customers? How you bring some of the efficiency to scale that? And the obvious three patterns is where are the things that are manual, repetitive, and then the third one, which isn't frequently as obvious, but where do you have a lot of the data, ideally structured data, to really bring in the AI pieces in there. And as we work with the companies, the common pitfall is like, how long should it actually take? Like from what we've seen, like within 3 months, you should be able to deploy a great proof of concept, prove the value, get it to production over the period of a year, max, kind of.
This guy in less than a year built an industry-leading voice model. So yeah, none of us have excuses for rolling out our, improved customer service awareness flow or something. It's not allowed to take longer than an industry-leading voice model. Okay, but you're saying with the data that maybe people are too quick to jump to where do I want to realize efficiencies, and instead they should start from where do I have really interesting data that other companies maybe don't have, and what are product experience I could build with that, even if it's not improving efficiencies or kind of laddering up to maybe a bit more of an exploration mindset when it comes to building AI functionality?
Exactly. So it will fall into one of those categories. Like if you do care about efficiency, customer support is the easiest one that we see repetitively, whether it's on text level, on the voice level. So easy. You have the knowledge of what's happening in a company, how you can train the agent, possible. But then you have these other elements where you have the IP, you have the content, you have the story that you want to convey as a brand, as a company. And now, if you have the backbone of that, that's your data. That's something that you can use to then build an interactive experience, something that represents your brand, something that people outside of the ecosystem can actually intersect with and try out.
Yeah, yeah. What's the most surprising application of ElevenLabs product you've seen?
I think the most surprising, so I'll start with one which was the most heartwarming for us, which when we started, initially a lot of people started using ElevenLabs to recreate, when they lost their voice due to ALS, to cancer, we used ElevenLabs and we partnered with them to bring that voice back. But a surprising version of that happened last year, where a congresswoman in the US unfortunately lost her voice, but wanted to continue working in Congress and represent her state. And we worked with her to recreate that voice. And it was the first time the AI voice was speaking in Congress to, despite the unfortunate circumstances, really show what's possible and continue that work. So that was one of the ones that was like the inspiring ones and incredible ones. Then we've seen, before any of the big AI labs created any of the voice piece, there was a startup that built effectively an integration between the voice ElevenLabs element, the LM stack, and the vision element, where they were going around as an effectively AI tourist companion that would narrate the world around you, and you could interact with that tourist. And that was back in like 2 years ago in a hackathon. Somebody built it, deployed it, it worked, and then they're building a company from that, which was amazing story from the early days. And maybe a fun one that we've seen more recently. So we hosted a hackathon, and people were exploring the future of agents, where agents start interacting with each other. So imagine you have your agent, you want to do a booking, they call a restaurant, and another agent answers that phone call and tries to take that booking. And they've built a demo where effectively the agents would then swap from the AI voices into their own language, start interacting to become more efficient, and then process that on the other side. And it worked.
And sorry, what does the more efficient agent language look like?
It's this protocol called Gibber or Gibberlink, where effectively it would switch from using words as we know them into using signals or frequencies.
Oh, I see.
To encode and decode effectively the message.
So you just hear the modem connecting sound, and
exactly.
Off they go. That's really funny. You can upgrade to a higher bandwidth communication format. You mentioned the big AI labs. They love talking about how applications and kind of more specific things are roadkill, and will be crushed underfoot. How do you avoid being crushed underfoot by much bigger labs?
Yeah, I think the one thing that makes ElevenLabs special is that we are trying to do both the research work, so the foundational models, and the products, with one focus on voice, but really trying to do both sides of the equation. So I think the way we think we can win is, the first is keeping the focus on voice and really double downing on building the best research models. My co-founder has been able to assemble some of the best researchers in the space across audio, who we think can actually produce those next breakthroughs. And maybe the big difference in voice to other models, at least for now, is that it's more about the model breakthroughs and the data rather than compute and scale. So you can actually still benefit from doing the foundational model work to bring it to another level. That might shift over time as we move from single modality into multimodality, which we are also working on. But currently, it's definitely true. For audio and voice, you need to do those breakthroughs. And then you have this other piece where we as a company spend a lot of time, is beyond research, you need to actually be able to use that research, whether it's the audiobook example on the narration side, or building the voice agent with having the metrics of how it performs, bringing the knowledge base intact, building the integrations intact. And that product layer is where we spend the majority of our product cycles to really be able to build that application side to the customers. And kind of those
because people are looking to ultimately do something with AI, like they actually need the end product.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like we believe you need to do both to really be able to successful, where by doing research, we can bring it to our products in a ways that others cannot. And then by building product, we meet customers where they are and work with them together.
You said it's not just all about scale and throwing more GPUs at it. It's about the better techniques and everything like that. I remember Greg Brockman from OpenAI saying that can sometimes be true, but basically in AI, every approach has worked better when you just throw more scale at it. And so, we invented transformers, and those were awesome. And then just like the more scale you put on them, the better the results got. Do you think that is true here, or is there kind of some reason it's not true in voice?
I think over time, increasingly so. Like as we fix some of the first foundational problems that happen with voice, it will become true. But if you don't and you just throw scale, you'll still get the bad output. Yeah. So in time, 100%. Yeah. And especially like one of the main paradigms we see is that we spoke about this. You mentioned the interruptibility. So you can do it in two ways. And one of the places where we started as a company was text to speech. And then over time, we extended that to speech to text, and now build an orchestration where you can combine speech to text, LLM, and text to speech, and the entire orchestration to make this possible. So these are like 3 separate models that kind of work, and we sync them together. But that will shift from this cascaded approach into that multimodal approach, where you train those models together. And in those cases, the scale will start becoming more important, and where we're investing all the time.
Yeah. We're currently in a societal equilibrium where if you want to do something that involves high trust, say you're doing some online banking and you want to say, OK, I want to transfer all my money out of my account. The bank will say, that's suspicious. We should verify that. We're going to get on the phone with this person and make sure we hear something that sounds very convincingly like them. And then we will allow them to transfer all the money out of their account. That made sense as an equilibrium for many decades until, well, you just heard it. What is the new equilibrium when it comes to trust and voice? Because the deepfake-based fraud is not just voice. We're also seeing it with kind of text and, I guess, now video. But just what do you think that new equilibrium looks like? How do we even verify identity?
No, it's a great question, and one where we've spent a lot of time thinking through like how, as you think about releasing the technology, how do you build the right safeguards to protect against the bad actors that will try to abuse it for those cases. And unfortunately, with the shifts, those bad actors will be there. So the main thing that we started from the beginning of the company is the whole notion of provenance and transparency, where for all the content that's generated with ElevenLabs, you can trace it back to who generated it. And that's supplemented with the moderation on the voice and text level.
But I actually believe that you guys can control somewhat how ElevenLabs voices are used, maybe, but also just this technology Pandora's box is out there.
Right.
And I'm curious how you think society-wide we adapt to the fact that presumably you think now just very convincing voice replicas are out there, and just how do we do? What do you think the new equilibrium looks like?
No, exactly. And so one thing that we started doing is, as we build that model, is we build it into a publicly available classifier where everybody from the space could initially do it just on ElevenLabs, get information, is that audio generated with ElevenLabs or not?
Oh, so you watermark the voices.
Effectively,
yeah.
Like classifier approach. And then over time, we started working with other companies to extend this, of train it on open source models, on other models, so like University of Berkeley, where they would try to extend that over. But then that's still not optimal, because you will still have new open source models, new commercial models. It's always a catch-up game. You cannot do that reliably. So as to your pointed question, I think the future will actually flip it from trying to detect for AI content. You'll actually detect for human content. So you'll have like encoded on device level, on a phone, on a computer, on a screening, like it's this person speaking, that's this person's device encoded, and decoded on the other side, this is that person. But so that's the easy, OK, great if everybody adopts it. But then there's a second layer, which I think is even more interesting, where given that proliferation of agents where everybody will have their agents or multiple of them, you will want to have in information that this is an authenticated AI agent. So in this case, there was your voice, which we created together. You want to know, like, yes, this was a voice created with my permission, with my consent, and you want that information to be out there. So then you can have a watermark with that information carried across. Second layer. And then the third layer is everything else. If it's not watermarked and authenticated or real, that's suspected as AI content, and you can deploy that classifier approach on that content as well to, like, is it AI or not? But by default, everything that's not authenticated should be tagged as AI.
That's very interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, it kind of reminds me of how malware detection works, where you think about like antivirus on your computer. It's looking for, if you go to run an executable file on your computer, the antivirus detection is looking at the code signature of that software and saying, we've seen this before and it's known bad. And if you look at how antivirus detection works, it's not perfect, but it's actually better than nothing and pretty reasonable. And so we end up with kind of similar malware detection for AI-generated voices. That's kind of interesting.
That's right. Or there's some interesting ideas from HTTPS protocol as well, of like how you have a trusted set of parts, entities that are part of it, that can like effectively extend that this is authenticated message that you send across. And same could happen with AI voices, that all the companies that opt in to have the AI watermarked authenticated voices or encoded real voices get that verification the same way like HTTPS would, and then everybody that isn't just doesn't.
I thought it was interesting you talking about permissioned use of your own voice and almost your agent out there. How should I be thinking about using my AI-generated voice? Like, am I missing opportunities to use, now that especially you guys have built one, am I missing opportunities to use that for something? How should I be using my AI voice?
I think the one place where, or maybe two quick places. The first one is definitely those interactive use cases. Like, how could you have an agent that
personally welcome people to Stripe?
Personally welcome people to Stripe, or ask you questions and get answers from all the past speeches, content that you created. But the second one, and you briefly actually showed it as well, is I think this will be this beautiful moment in the future where suddenly all the language barriers will break because your voice will now be understandable in all the languages. You'll be able to travel to those countries. Let's hope the hardware moment happens as well, where you can actually communicate with everyone with the same intonation, emotion, carry that message across in a way that kind of wasn't possible. And hopefully the movies in Poland will also get solved by that time. But that would be an amazing one.
That's true. The language one actually maybe feels like the biggest thing, where there was a long time where human translation was the only viable thing on the web, and people went through all these extraordinary efforts, and then kind of in the last few years, the machine translation has gotten good enough, and so now a lot of the translations we consume on the web are just machine translation. They're good, and kind of similarly, we'll presumably see way more foreign language content, just period, because the
100%. All the employees of Stripe internationally will be able to hear the native one.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right, the all hands in. And you get this induced demand effect where, there's much more of it than there would have otherwise been. Very interesting. Last question. You are a big fan of Disney, and I'm curious how you've been inspired by Disney, by Bob Iger. What parts of the Disney playbook have you incorporated as you build ElevenLabs?
I think there's so many incredible things that Disney created over the years, of course. But the one that is the very, very easy to say is definitely the storytelling of across the entire company, across all the work that they are trying to do. That you feel like you're part of that story, from like animated movies to like Up to Star Wars, where all of them feel timeless in many ways. In many ways, we hope to, as we think about creating that technology, we are not creating technology for its own sake, but trying to figure out how it is able to tell the story to all the different audiences that we interact with, and how people can be part of that story too. And maybe the second one, which I really like about Bob Iger specifically, which he brought into Disney, was that concept that everybody across Disney would need to dress up as one of those fluffy Disney park animals or characters, and you would interact with the guests to really understand how that brand works, how they perceive it, who the users are. And this really resonated with us, where we are trying to stay very close to users across the entirety of the company, whatever part of the company you are building.
And so what's your version of dressing up as Mickey Mouse?
The one that I've done a few times now was customer support and staying very close to answering the tickets.
Yeah.
And you can learn so much. I think you do that too, actually, where you invite a person into the call to tell them about the pains.
Yes.
You learn surprisingly much from those.
So maybe like Disney, you should understand what is it that your company truly differentiates on and is exceptional at, and then make sure all people working at the company are staying incredibly close to that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mati, thank you so much for joining us.
John, thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.